That's carried. And the next item, sorry, I thought we were going straight on to the other minutes. I've got, right, okay. The Central City Action Plan refresh. I think, have we got... Sorry? What's that?
Just a bit confused about your Central City momentum, whether they were minutes or they're actually just, this is a report to council, wasn't it?
That was just the minutes. We've done that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes, I had a question about the Central
City Action Plan refresh. So there's no presentation on that, is there? No. Okay.
Well, can I just ask a question?
Yeah. Okay. Well, I mean, you can move it, but I have. I personally would like us to consider laying this one on the table. But John, perhaps if you come forward, that's probably the easiest way. And Brendan. So at our meeting, we had a, sorry, and I just haven't opened it. I got sidetracked into thinking that all of our minutes were being dealt with at the same time. At our meeting, we asked that the refresh be supported by the evaluation report, which is shown as a draft evaluation report, but it's not a draft, is it? No. So, and the evaluation report that was completed in September for, is that right, for the October to March period, October 2018 to March 2020.
That's correct.
Right. So when I read it, what seemed to be missing was the concept of an action plan having set goals and then having different actions that would help us measure whether we were achieving those goals or not. But these evaluations, this evaluation report, seems to talk about achievements as it doesn't sort of seem to set goals other than what the agreed action plan focus areas are, without any specific goals or milestones to achieving those goals. So it strikes me that in refreshing the action plan, that's what we really need to do, because when we read the momentum report that was actually written out of, I think it was Regenerate Christchurch, wasn't it? That was really quite focused on what would need to happen in order to meet the meet what needed to be achieved within the central city, and many of the risks that it identified are actually even more concerning today than they were back then. And I know COVID-19 has had an element of an impact in relation to that, but we're just not making the difference that we need to make, both in terms of central city residential and the other elements of the plan.
So staff agree with you, Leanne, that the report that we have measures the actions that we said that we'd do under the Central City Action Plan. And just to remind everyone, the Central City Action Plan was designed as a 3-year plan to cover a particularly vulnerable period, while some of the major facilities and anchor projects were in their final completion phases. So we're coming up to the end of that period over the next year. We have updated the council website, and we brought this to the attention of the committee as well. So the outcomes that you're talking about are reported explicitly on the council website under Central City Insights. So there are 3 theme areas, there's 8 outcomes that are measured, and there's a wealth of information under those outcomes. Just in terms of how the Central City is progressing, actually the Central City population is increasing. It's increasing faster than the rest of the city population, so it's up 8.5% to the end of October. That's a significant increase. Central City spending is up 19% then at the same period year on year, so that's up until the end of September. So people are spending in the Central City. The impact of COVID-19 on the Christchurch CBD is far less than any other CBD in the country, so Christchurch has proved more resilient in terms of its central city than any other CBD in the country. And the other one that we touch on in the 8011 project is we're on track this year to complete more than 400 homes in the central city, which is 100 more than our previous record year, which was last year, where we completed about 300 homes. So many of the indicators that we are tracking that deliver on the outcomes of a thriving economic heart of an international city, a vibrant people-focused place day and night, and growing livable central city neighbourhoods are tracking in the right direction. So that information is, and a wealth of other information, is publicly available on the council website.
Yeah, I think that I was more looking at some of the things that we have agreed to do, and whether they are impacting on that, or are these things happening anyway. I mean, I'll use one example, and that is the number of what are they called? They got nicknamed the Dirty 30. Even though the numbers have reduced, we don't actually have a goal of having none, and we don't have measurable steps where we have certain actions and processes agreed where they are actually all ticked off the list. You know, so that's what I mean by the measuring of goals, writing down that the number has decreased from 30, well, the net decrease has been, I can't remember, about 9, I think I read in this, doesn't seem to be targeted to what we need to do to actually fix the problem that we've got.
Sure. So what I talked about were the 3 high-level themes, and you're talking about a subcomponent within those. It is always difficult to know whether the actions that you're undertaking lead to the impact and the outcomes exclusively themselves. So we've done the actions, and what I've articulated is the outcomes or the impact heading in the right direction. Whether we can put it all down to that action, no, of course you can't. And on the example that you've provided, the majority of those buildings are owned privately. There are a couple that are owned by council. Good progress has been made, but we certainly haven't resolved the issue. There's still 21 at least across the city that are barriers to the city's progress.
Well, I'm not sure. I'm not prepared to shrug. I would rather that we did some further work on actually establishing some achievable goals and monitored those against an action plan that had a set of very specific deliverables, rather than the generic phrases of, we have a commitment to relentlessly pursue residents and visitors. The fact that the numbers are still below the amount of residents in the 4 avenues at the time of the earthquakes doesn't actually indicate the significant amount of progress that we need to make. And, if we need the goal to be a set amount by a certain amount of time and then increase it over time, then then that to me is the appropriate way to go. But I'm expressing some frustration with the process of this.
Yeah,
Jake.
I think I kind of understand what you mean, but I just want a bit of clarity. Are you saying it's not so much in terms of what our staff do in terms of the work program, but more in terms of what we want the city to be and the goals, our goals for the city, and kind of separate from the organisation a little bit?
There's two things. One, this has never been about a Christchurch City Council plan. It's about a central city plan, and there are a number of players. But one of the particular approaches is around city leadership, clarifying agency roles and collaborate. And apparently we've simplified it with a shared voice and more collaboration. Rationalisation of the range of organisation leading aspects of the city's regeneration has greatly simplified the accountability for progress. But I don't think that's an outcome in its own right. The outcome is whether we're making progress. And in terms of the city's regeneration, I think that we still have got decisions to make around the DCL transition and the role of Christchurch NZ as our economic development agency. So actually focusing on that might actually shift responsibility for the Central City Action Plan, who holds the action plan and then becomes accountable for the measures against which they're held. It might be best held by a co-governance arrangement or by a different arrangement than the one we have now. I'd just rather that instead of just refreshing the Central City Action Plan, actually have a fundamental look at it in terms of achieving the objectives that were set out in the Regenerate Christchurch report.
Well, sure, just as a process issue, because I'm conscious this has been through 2 other bodies before now, and it just feels a little unfair. What were you suggesting? Obviously, let this lie on the table. Maybe, I mean, you have a policy advisor who works, with you specifically.
No.
Maybe they could work with strategy and
I don't.
planning.
Just to be clear, what you articulated there is exactly what we are proposing and are doing. Remember, the refresh started before COVID-19 and was interrupted in terms of its visibility, and it's been now through the working group in the committee and now coming to council. So it's this by and large reflects work that was 99% done prior to COVID, has been updated in light of COVID, but actually the more fruitful piece of work is the fundamental new plan, not the refresh going from year 2 to year 3, which is what we're reporting back on, but the fundamentally new plan to reflect that with Te Pai opening and with the Metro Sports Centre and with the Canterbury Multi-Use Arena opening and the other private facilities around the city, the way that the city centre will operate over the next period is fundamentally different to the way in the issues that we were trying to solve 2.5 years ago when the Central City Action Plan was first put in place.
This is for which period?
The new piece of work or the piece
The
of
new
work?
piece of work.
For the period, it needs to pick up for probably the next 3-year period through until the opening of the Canterbury Multi-Use Arena. 3-4 year period.
So this will last until the beginning of the 2021 financial year.
This plan has roughly got an 18-month time frame. It's what we can achieve in the next year and a half until that subsequent piece of work comes on. It's worth saying that a lot of the action within the action plan, considering the review has been delayed for over almost a year now, a lot of the action has been going on regardless, continuing to coordinate across partners and everything else. So it is just seeing us through the next 12 to 18 months, and all the issues I think you've raised will be picked up in that next piece of work. And it, to some extent, will pick up on some of the outcomes coming out of Greater Christchurch 2050 and the like. So,
spatial plan.
So in recommending to Council that the refreshed Central City Action Plan be endorsed, why don't we just simply acknowledge or note that the Refresh Central City Action Plan has been endorsed and that work, has been completed, and that additional work will now be focused on the next stage action plan, so that it's because we still have got some major decisions to make as a council in relation to Christchurch NZ, beyond the transition from DCL and the economic development activities that sit in so significantly with the decisions that we have yet to make about where certain functions will lie and what the role of the council will be and what the role of Christchurch NZ will be in terms of those efforts. So I think if we could just agree to those wording. James?
I don't disagree with anything that you've said, but I almost wonder now if what you're proposing isn't actually mutually exclusive to what we've got there. All this stuff is going to be happening anyway, the measurables and the sort of KPIs, for lack of a better word, or what success looks like. I think we're both committed to refocusing, reshaping this to give it some new impetus and actually give it some momentum, which, it hasn't had what we would have liked, but we can rectify that. I think what we've got in front of us makes a lot of sense. It's constantly evolving though. You can turn to any page of it and it's probably just a bit of a snapshot to a certain extent. It mentions DCL throughout it. That's not necessarily the world now. Talks about Aotea gifts. Well, that's on the market. That's not happening. I think the principles of it have gone through a pretty good process. I think staff, you, me, everyone else that's on the committee are pretty well aligned. So we can turn our attention to trying to focus this down with having some tangible measurables offline. But I actually kind of lean with Jake with this, that we sign it off and then we also do what you're suggesting as well, which is always going to happen anyway. And I completely agree with you, and I'm committed to working with you to get that done.
Well, I think you've just highlighted though that the content of it is not up to date.
That's the nature of it though. If we send it back to get it up to date, it will be out of date again by the time it comes back to us.
We don't need to update it. We simply note that the refresh has been completed. Staff have done the refresh.
It's sort of semantics, but yeah.
They're working on it anyway, and that additional work will be focused on the next stage action plan. Right. And that's a statement of what is actually happening.
First things first, I'd like to get some momentum on this item, so whatever works then.
Thank you. Yep. Thank you.
Just wondering if this, is there an opportunity in this to bring into bit of focus this inner city safety? We have the Safer Christchurch strategy, which is kind of hanging at the moment, and I know that Leanne, you wanted to do some work on crafting what that might look like from a local point of view in terms of what we want for safety, around safety in the inner city. This, I know that it talks about caring for, what does it say? Can't remember the words, but caring for people and mentioned homelessness. But I'm just wondering, could this be the umbrella to gather that into as well?
Yep, that's all part of it. Well, others can speak to it, but it is all part of it as far as I'm aware.
Certainly an arising theme within the central city that antisocial behaviour, homelessness continues to be an issue that will need to be tackled in the next stage. So, yeah.
Yep. Who else? Yanni?
I see that one of the actions is reviewing the incentives for development. So when is that happening? Because I'm just mindful of the deputation we had this morning.
That was on a different paper.
This started.
A lot of accuracy in that deputation.
Sorry, I'll just quote page 159, item number 17, which I believe is this 17. Guiding future regeneration, agreement of funding opportunities and incentives to support development, a review of existing and alternative incentives is underway. So it is in this paper. I'm just trying to understand when it's happening and what the process is to have a say on that.
Yep.
That issue might be best discussed in the next item, which touches directly on this.
Okay. And just a final question from me was around the environmental indicators. Do we have any environmental indicators?
So when the action plan was established, you asked that very question. We did a lot of investigation at the time, and there was nothing that could be specifically pinned to the central city. There's a lot of data around citywide managing of air quality, water quality, and those sorts of things. I guess environment has really become a perceptual measure in terms of livability and those things, which are captured in the central city insights.
So is there a way that we could track things like, I guess, green building design, uptake of certain technologies that were more sustainable than others?
I guess those are measures. Whether we collect enough of that is a question you posed last time, and that there isn't at the moment.
Okay.
It's just not being gathered.
Thank you. So it's been moved and seconded, so I'll put that motion. All those in favour say aye. Those opposed say no. It's carried. What?